This video is brought to you by my wonderful Patreon team. If you want to join the Patreon team, please feel free to click the link down below. And if you do not, that's totally fine. I still hope you enjoyed the video. What are the little quirks that you do, or maybe have always done? Is it a nervous shake of the knee, comforting yourself in moments of stress or excitement? Maybe it's that little subtle chew of the side of the lip while you're daydreaming, or possibly you have ADHD or even OCD and you find yourself checking something twice over just to confirm that the task is done. These little moments in everybody's personality are all too common and also very normal, and for me it's just what makes everyone so unique from each other. And as you can see, I've been thinking about the personality and quirks of characters and what we could possibly see characters do while they're in idle animations, and what we learn about our heroes during these small moments of movement. Of course, it could be a character checking their gear like we see Link do, or maybe something in line with their goofy character like Crash throwing a Wumpa fruit in the air but being confused that it doesn't come back down when he expected it to. Or of course you could just be like Mario, fall asleep and dream about food. A brilliant example is take the two Sonics. Both of them are the same blue hedgehog, but each have their own little moments of personalities. Old Sonic is super sassy behind that charming little smile, judging you with a speedy tap to his foot, while the modern and possibly younger Sonic isn't in that same sort of rush. He's more laid back, he's just there stretching, checking his equipment and just waiting for you to take your time as much as he is. That impatient and ready to go nature that the old Sonic has tells you so much about his personality. He knows he has to be that hero that many of us looked up to when we were growing up in the early video game days, and he knows he's expected to save the day. While modern Sonic is very laid back and even cocky, like he knows he already is the hero and there's nothing that the villains can do to stop him. And that's the point though, we already see these characters as heroes and icons and almost like celebrities. It's like watching Tom Cruise or even Christian Bale on screen. We see their traits and their unique takes on characters that we grow up with. If Tom Cruise was ever replaced as Ethan in Mission Impossible, something wouldn't feel right. It's because he's made Ethan his own and become the face of that franchise that we've fallen in love with so much. And this got me thinking about the personalities that are larger than life, but at that same time we never truly necessarily get to see them with our own eyes because we're too busy looking at the world through theirs. That's right, of course I am talking about first person characters and their personalities that they bring with just the 5 fingers on their hands. But before we jump into this, I want to recommend a very good friend of the channel and of course a YouTube peer, A Face Full of Eyes, and their amazing aesthetic series on the Far Cry games and also Call of Duty. If you enjoy what you're about to see here, then please check out his work because it's just art. We strive desperately to find protagonists that we can relate with in every journey that we're a part of. But it's so rare that we ever get a hero that fully remains faceless, especially in the movie industry where we're expected to see the actor's face. But when there is an actor who comes along like Carl Urban, who played Dredd and never ever taken his mask off, it achieves nothing but respect to sticking to the role and what made Dredd so iconic in the first place, instead of worrying about the ego of seeing a beautiful man's face on the big screen. And as I said earlier on, just like actors, we become attached to these personas and icons in video games. The best example is the likes of the Resident Evil franchise. We have been shown the faces of the series, Jill, Leon, Claire, Chris, and so many more. These faces are the people of the franchise. We expect to play as them in the third person, and when we do, we can embody the larger than life skills that they all require to take on any deadly foes that come against us. In turn, making us become less fearful of the world around them because we're able to embody them as a character and a personality. But when a game like Resident Evil 7 comes at us with a faceless character who is inexperienced, such as Ethan, there is so much that we had to endure and learn just from his point of view. And I believe that this was an interesting step, but the right one. I did a whole entire video dedicated to Resident Evil 7, so I'm not going to talk about it much more. But I doubt we're ever going to see our main heroes and cast of Resident Evil in an FPS Resident Evil game in the foreseeable future, because that will completely erase the point of having them there in the first place. There is this expectation we have created around these characters. What's the point of playing as Claire if we're unable to see her iconic red jacket, or even playing as Leon and see him flick his beautiful hair? I do know that they did do the DLC in Resident Evil 7 where you play as Chris, but let's be serious, that wasn't Chris. But because they're iconic, they've almost become untouchable in the series, and that's where I believe Ethan was the right choice to go. As you play first person games, you'll probably see that the hands seem to retain this cleanliness or even an untouchable feeling. But then there's games like Far Cry 3 or Outlast 1 or even Resident Evil 7 where the devs include scenes of mutilation that remind the player that they're also a part of this world and not protected by that first person blanket. This allows us to understand just how scared and how determined Ethan is as a survivor, and I believe Resident Evil 7 did a fantastic job of introducing him as an icon to the series, despite never seeing his beautiful lovely face in the game. But sometimes that's what we want. Sometimes we want to be untouchable and empowered by the characters we play as, and then that's when someone like Master Chief comes to mind.
Punch it.
Master Chief is possibly the most iconic space marine out there in the industry. In the first 3 games we're told the legend of this Spartan John 117. This 7-foot tall Spartan won the hearts of so many players despite being such an antisocial character. Though he had that strong silent type demeanour, he was still able to bring so many quirks along with him in battle. There was so much weight that would come with slamming the Halo 1 Magnum around the skulls of the Covenant and then flipping it back into his palm, or even when you're just standing there waiting patiently, he would just check the gun and tightly screw the screws back in place to ensure that the Magnum wouldn't jam mid-fight. Each and every animation that Chief has with the weapons will confirm a very important part about his character. He knows exactly what he's doing with the tools he is provided. And if he doesn't, he's very quickly willing to learn what something does, as you see in the plasma pistol animation. Interestingly enough, Halo 1 is the only Halo game where the passenger seat of the Warthog is seen in the first person. And I believe this was on purpose, because by the second game, Master Chief wasn't a stranger to gamers anymore. He had become a fucking icon. When he saddles up in a Warthog, we expect to see our hero blasting away at the Covenant, and when we fight the enemy, we expect them to fear this man who has become so empowered by the legacy that he brought on from the first game. Halo produced that power fantasy of a super soldier, but most importantly, it sold that fantasy to you. The original trilogy was the story of the Spartan that won a war. But it wasn't until Halo 4 that the stories just became about you, the Master Chief. But before we get to that, we need to remember Reach. Halo Reach introduced us to Noble Team and gave us one of the darkest stories the franchise has ever told. Bungie made you experience so many breathtaking moments through the eyes of Noble 6, and of course using static cinematography for first person scenes through the lenses of cameras, never allowing you to leave this immersive world and trying to tell it through every single angle that seemed believable. They needed you to feel like you were losing this battle. Every time you were faced with a hard choice or scenes of tension, we would view the world from the eyes of Noble 6, creating a full personal connection unlike anything we'd seen in the original trilogy. Noble 6 was never intended to be the face of Reach, but instead it's that story of the events that happened all around him. 6 will interact with items within the world in first person, there will be fight scenes with elites in first person, and even the way that he would check his guns in his hands with a totally different and focused intent, unlike Chief, it would feel completely different. Master Chief's animations felt like he was about efficiency and making sure he was prepared. He would get a feel of the weight of the shotgun just before he pulls the trigger, while Noble 6 is over here checking if another shell was in the gauge, so he's ready to fire at the next enemy that comes around the corner. And of course 343 was in charge of making Halo 4, and they took a lot of tips from Halo Reach. There are so many fantastic moments in Halo Reach which were from the point of view of 6, and I believe that they wanted to tell this same sincere and even darker story within Halo 4. In Halo 4 we get a small glimpse of Master Chief in the beginning of the game before we're put right into his boots. The game then goes an entire mission without cutting to a single scene where we see Master Chief from the third person. From leaving the pod in third person, to talking to Cortana and putting her in the back of his head all in first person, to the inputs that we must do to open doors, to interacting with objects or climbing from air ducts, and of course that forward leap fight that happens all without leaving the POV of this icon. This is the first time where we finally get to see this character move in full motion from his eyes, and in turn creating a story that just feels so much more personal to him and Cortana. 343 had a really big task ahead of them to follow up one of the greatest trilogies in gaming. They introduced a new style to the visuals that came with so many weapons that honestly felt so alien to the universe, as they should. And with each and every animation, it still confirms that this is the Master Chief that we know and love, just because he has this general curiosity with every single gun. And that curiosity, I believe, is very important when talking about idle animations in first person. Player curiosity fuels almost every single first person idle animation interaction, as it's a way to show us as the player ways you can interact with these objects, just like we would be imagining or even be wondering. When we see characters interact with them, it fulfills that moment of, oh okay, these are actual tangible objects within these worlds that players and characters even understand how to use. From Gordon trying to touch the snark and then for it to aggressively snap at him, or the way that Lo Wang has a cool interaction button with every weapon, just showing how well he understands every gun and tool he has in his pocket. But sometimes games are unable to fulfill what we want to expect from interactions in video games with their objects. Left 4 Dead is a game series full of character, from its wacky dialogue all the way to its incredible music. The game itself is just filled to the brim with personality. But there's one area where I feel like it's desperately lacking, and that's in its hand animations. Of course not in quality, but in quantity. Everyone seems to handle the guns in exactly the same way. Imagine if a character like Zoe reloaded a gun with a little bit more delicacy as she input every single clip, desperately stroking the gun on top, while Francis on the other hand does not give a damn and he's just smacking his hand over it. That would be the cherry on top of making these characters all so expressive and so different from each other if they interacted completely differently instead of mimicking each other's actions. Very much like Mime, a silent protagonist of a first person game has to show their motivations and traits through exaggerated movements and expressions through the hands. It doesn't take 5 seconds for us to realise how powerful Doom Guy is. From the way that he smashes skulls and punches screens out the way, we can tell that Doom Guy already just does not give a damn and he's here to do one thing, and that's to kill every single demon. Or it's the way that the Modern Warfare 2 characters spin pistols around their fingers without giving a damn, trying to show that excitement of multiplayer and being cool and hit with the kids, why Modern Warfare 2019's more mature tone shows these characters carefully inspecting these guns with incredible trigger discipline. But don't get me wrong, there's nothing like having fun in first person and having these expressive, ridiculous, over the top reloading animations, because it helps put us in the boots and even the mindset of being a badass, and it reminds us that we're able to do anything within these worlds and be as cool and ridiculous as we want, and it makes you feel just as cool as the characters themselves. Which brings me to my next subject, virtual reality. I couldn't tell you a single name of a main character from a virtual reality video game, outside of Ethan of course from Resident Evil 7, which truly doesn't even count, and even Alex, who I just know from Half-Life 2. But that's totally okay, because virtual reality is all about making you feel like the hero. The games all intentionally point to you and expect you to solve the issues. Mostly the unnamed characters are there just so it can feel like you can use your own name and be your own personality. But imagine if you're standing there with your one-to-one movement of your touch controls, being able to inspect and hold a gun however you want, but then all of a sudden a character starts doing an idle animation and checking a gun for themselves. Right away, this will pull the rug from under your feet. Now this isn't you. This person you're playing as seems to have a whole entire mind and personality of their own, and immediately it takes away that fantasy and illusion of you being the hero of your own story. But you know what's pretty fun about this, and I actually had a bit of fun recording this, is that even though it was me recording these moments, me inspecting the guns like this or doing stupid stuff in Boneworks, there was something quite fun about seeing my personality amplified through these animations. If it was you the viewer right now watching, interacting with the guns exactly like I did in virtual reality, it would be completely different. And that's what I think is wonderful, and it's very much like all these games that I've been speaking about. Virtual reality allows us to inspect and look at these objects with exactly the same way and curiosity that Master Chief had, and for the first time I felt like that I was able to put my own personalities and silly quirks in full motions in a character in a video game. And it was seeing that really made me appreciate how much personality can be within a simple reload of a gun from a silent protagonist of a face that we will never ever get to see, because there's just so much character and personality in the 5 digits on the palms of our hands. Hello, I hope you enjoyed this video, and as you could tell I had no idea how to end this one, so I had to say something pretentious and talk about fingers. If you enjoyed this video, please, I would love it if you leave a like, and of course subscribe for more videos like this every single Thursday, and of course I will see you at the next checkpoints. Goodbye.